I need to see your driver's license and registration. Well, I pulled you over because you were speeding. Look, I'm not going to argue with you. You can take that to court, okay? I just need to see your document. Sir, do not yell at me, okay? Do not yell at me. Get out of the car. Oh, no, you're going to get out of the car. I will get you out of the car. Use of force. What is it? In terms of law enforcement, it is the amount of force used to compel an unwilling subject to comply. What if we could live in a society where law enforcement did not have to use force? Doesn't that sound great? It's never going to happen. And I'll tell you why it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen because there will always be those that will not comply with the laws of society. And they will do anything not to be taken into custody, even killing those pursuing them. And then there are those that will hurt and torture others for no other reason but to watch them suffer. Those are the evil ones. And yes, they do exist. But let's set those scenarios aside, as well as some others. What if we could live in a society where law enforcement agencies across the nation could have their officer use less force on any given day? And what if we could live in a society where a simple encounter between a law enforcement officer and a citizen doesn't become a confrontation? You know, like the ones we've seen on television? So how do we change the narrative? The philosopher Socrates, he put it best when he said, "Know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." So I'm going to talk about how knowing ourselves can make officers better decision makers. And I'm going to talk about how understanding our own weaknesses and our own struggles can help us empathize with those that we make contact with in the community. So let's get started. So how did I get here? Well, in 1997, I joined the law enforcement community. And at the end of the academy, we had to take a human diversity class, or I used to call it a how to treat people that don't look like you class. So in my class, you know, we had white folks, and we had black folks, and we had Hispanic folks, and we talked about stereotypes, and, well, why can't you say that and I can't say that? And there was a lot of tension. But we survived it, we learned from it, and moving forward, I continued to take those classes. And I did benefit, but I always felt like there was an element missing. In 2016, a supervisor approached me and said he wanted me to take another human diversity class. And I'm thinking to myself, 97, 98, 99, I'm probably the most diverse person I know. But he promised me that this one was different. And so I went. And he was right. This one was different because it was inclusive. It wasn't just about how to treat them, but how to treat ourselves. It was called the RIGHT training, Racial Intelligence Training and Engagement. And it dealt with emotional intelligence plus social intelligence equals racial intelligence. In essence, looking at our own emotions first, understanding where we are at all times emotionally, plus having an understanding of those that we make contact in the community will equal to better outcomes. And that's what we all want. You know. And so we did this training, the officers were engaged, and we talked about things like, you know, what to do when you're headed to that call of a horrific child abuse case or child neglect. And they talked about the emotions that you go through to when you're heading to that next call. That's a tragic suicide, you know. And one of the things that really stood out in this training to me was one about the emotional ladder. It utilizes a picture of a ladder. And on each rung of the ladder, there's an emotion. At the very top of the ladder, we have emotions such as happiness and joy and gratitude. And as you make your way down to the bottom, we have emotions such as hate, anger, anxiety, fear. At the top is where we want to stay. At the bottom is where some of us live, even us in law enforcement. So we did some training. We talked about what to do when you find yourself at the bottom of the ladder. We use visuals. How many of you have cell phones? Probably all of us. So what's on your cell phone? See, we talked about having pictures that will bring us back to the top of that ladder. And for me, I have a picture of my beautiful family, plus my dogs. I have a picture of our great vacation experiences. And I have a picture of my pension, because that keeps me on the top of the ladder. But we also talked about doing things that take us from the bottom and keeps us up here toward the top. And for me, it's music. Now, when I have a very frustrating day at work, I leave the office and walking down the sidewalk, and I don't care who's around me. I think of music, because I love music. So I think of one of my favorite artists, Dobie Gray, and his song, Drift Away. And I'll just kind of go right to the verse that I love. When my mind is free, you know a melody can move me. And when I'm feeling blue, the guitar's coming through to soothe me. See, y'all about to go to church, right? I see it. Some of you nod your heads, but that's what it does for me. It gets me back to where I am, and I understand where I'm at all times, you know. So what are we talking about as far as understanding our emotions, identifying where we're at all times? Imagine your best friend calls you in the middle of the night. They say they're broken down, they need you to come get them. And so being a good friend you are, you crawl out of bed, you get dressed, you jump in your car, and you're driving down the road to pick your friend up. A couple of miles down the road, you hear this knocking sound in the engine. You know something's wrong. And it's not the first time you've heard it. So what do? You probably do what you always do. You turn up the radio, you drown it out, and you keep driving. You know, there are those of us in law enforcement, we have that same kind of knocking sound going on inside of us. But it's an emotional one, you know. Be it through burnout from the job. Is there some kind of family illness that we're going through? And what do? We turn up the volume of life, and we drown it out. We ignore it. And agencies across the nation, they tell their officers to take your vehicles, their persons, and I want you to go out there, and I want you to help those who are broken down. Now imagine this, these agencies, they receive thousands of calls of service. It could be a 911 call, simple hang-up call, or it can be a homicide and everything in between. Armed robbery, sexual battery. And they send them out there to try and fix those things. But they have to start with themselves. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. It teaches us how to identify our emotions. And you know, when I'm speaking with my deputies about this, they love the training. They thought it was one of the greatest things they've experienced. And so we talked about what happens when we make contact with an individual. That can have short-term and long-term effects on our community. For example of that, if you would, travel back in time with me. I am a 17-year-old on the cross-country team. It is a beautiful Saturday morning, and I'm out for an 8-mile run. At about mile 6, I see all these police cars converge in front of me. They jump out. They ask me where I'm coming from. I said, I'm on an 8-mile run. I'm at mile 6 right now. So you're saying that you wasn't over there where a lady was just broken into? No, sir, it wasn't me. Well, you fit the description of the suspect. So they placed me in the backseat of a patrol car. They took me back to the scene. They took me out of the patrol car. They went upstairs to the house, and they escorted an elderly lady out to the yard. And they asked her, "Is that the guy that broke into your house?" And I remember her squinting And I'm thinking to myself, I'm about to go to jail for something I didn't do. But she said, no, it wasn't him. And so they placed me back in the patrol car. They took me back to where they met me at. They dropped me off. They didn't say anything. They took off to find the culprit. And I remember being angry and being confused. And I remember running those last 2 miles with tears streaming down my face. And for the next 11 years or so before I got to law enforcement, every time I would see an officer coming my way, I would go the other way. Because it took me back to that 17-year-old. And then when I did become a law enforcement officer, I realized that they were just doing their job. But I also know it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. What if these officers had been trained in emotional intelligence? Could they have utilized some empathy? Maybe walked in my shoes? Could they have even apologized for the misunderstanding that could have had a different impact on me than it had? Now fast forward to today. Imagine an officer. He's headed to a violent domestic violence call. Lights and sirens. This officer, he is going through a divorce. His teenage son was just expelled from school. He just recently filed for bankruptcy. Where do you think he would be on that ladder? Could it affect him when he arrives at the scene? Could it affect him on a traffic stop? You know, we carry a lot of emotional baggage, and we must learn how to process it. When we hear about these instances of excessive use of force, officer misconduct, it is easy to drive the narrative of race. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, you know, of course you're an officer, Sergeant Jones. You're going to take up for your officers. You know, I've been in law enforcement for about 21 years, but I've been black for 50 years. And in both cases, by some, I've been painted with that broad brush of you people. And nobody likes it. So why don't we work on getting to the root of the problem? I don't know what happened in each of those instances that you may see on television. But what I do know, as a seasoned law enforcement officer and as a supervisor in internal affairs, that a lack of emotional intelligence plays a role in officers' behavior. We are not robots. This emotional intelligence training isn't just about how we treat other people. It's about how we treat ourselves. And we are not robots. People may think us out there doing our jobs, we're just machines. But underneath these badges, there are humans. And a lot of times there are humans that are crying out for help. In 2017, USA Today released a report, and it brought to the light that 46 law enforcement officers were fatally shot in the line of duty. 140 committed suicide. You know, I'm proud of the men and women that I work with every day. I'm proud of this profession. I'm even prouder of the leadership that brought emotional intelligence training to us. I think we're a better agency because of it. I receive positive feedback from our deputies, and I get calls from the community about how professional our officers are. And I think every agency should train their officers in emotional intelligence training. I think it serves multiple purposes. For one, as an agency, here's your opportunity to show your officer that I care about you more than just as an officer, but also as a person. And it allows that officer to be aware and stay aware of where they are emotionally at all times, especially when they make contact with the community. And last but not least, it gives an officer a great opportunity to use their voice instead of force. Thank you.